Are you craving a trip on Space Mountain? Well, we've got the next best thing. Welcome to Disney Coast to Coast.
Hey folks, and welcome to Disney Coast to Coast, the ultimate unofficial Disney fan podcast. I'm Jeff DePauli, and today on the show, my friend Banks Lee is joining me to discuss one of the latest series on Disney Plus called Prop Culture. Prop Culture is a docu-series where movie prop collector Dan Lanigan reunites iconic Disney movie props with the filmmakers, actors, and crew who created and used them in some of Disney's most beloved movies. Through his journey, Dan Lanigan discovers lost artifacts, visits private collections, and helps restore pieces from the Walt Disney Archives to their original glory. Some of the films featured in this series include Tron, The Nightmare Before Christmas, Mary Poppins, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and some others. Oh, and did I forget to mention that there's an entire episode dedicated to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids? I bet you can guess which one I watched first. We'll get to all of that and more right after this. On this very podcast, I've interviewed many voiceover talents over the years. Folks like Bill Farmer, who performs the voices of Goofy and Pluto, Mark Silverman, who you can hear as Rod Serling on the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, Daniel Ross, who can be heard as Donald Duck, and so many more other great talents. But have you ever thought about getting into voiceover yourself? As you may or may not know, I've worked in the voiceover industry myself, landing some pretty cool gigs. One of those cool gigs is as the official host of Disney Trivia on the Amazon Echo Dot. I wouldn't have been able to land such a cool gig without some amazing instructors through the years, one of which is Michael Christopher. And now you can be trained by Michael as well with his new online training. Visit bestvoiceovercourse.com to learn how you can begin your voiceover training at an affordable price. And if you want an even better deal, just use the code word Jeff when checking out. But hurry up, as there is a limit to the amount of times this code can be used. So visit bestvoiceovercourse.com, use code word Jeff, that's Jeff, and get your voiceover career started now. And who knows, maybe someday I'll be chatting with you on this very podcast about your Disney voiceover work. Once again, that's bestvoiceovercourse.com and use code word Jeff.
It's time to dive into today's Disney dialogue.
Alrighty, Banks, welcome back to the show. We are here to talk about prop culture, and I gotta start by admitting something. I have not been watching a ton of Disney Plus lately. Ever since all my favorite shows from the original launch ended their seasons, I haven't really tuned in, but prop culture was something I've been keeping my eyes on for a while. So how about you?
When the prop culture was first announced, it was immediate. Okay, this is going to be a first night drop binge fest for me, especially because unlike the other Disney Plus shows, they released all these all at once. It wasn't a weekly show. I watched Mandalorian and a lot of the stuff when it first dropped. But we've actually been watching Disney Plus on a pretty nightly basis because we've been doing a Simpsons marathon from the beginning. So we're still through that. So that's kind of our only reason to open up Disney Plus. But we still catch some of the old stuff every now and then.
Yeah, if you're watching The Simpsons beginning to end, you're good for several years there. There's no lack of content with that. But yeah, no, I tuned into that Coco music celebration, and well, I was a little disappointed by it, to be completely honest. And then I don't know what it is. It's just so much stuff going on, and there's so many things to see everywhere. Especially now, everybody seems to be doing some special streams online and stuff. So I don't know. I haven't been tuning into Disney Plus, but prop culture, like you said, first of all, before we get too into it, why don't you tell folks a little bit about what the show is? The title kind of says it all, but why don't you describe it real briefly?
Yeah, I mean, the general consensus, it's a show that looks at the props and costumes from Disney films, past and current. Basically, they've picked 8 films, and each episode is a deep dive into one specific film. A guy named Dan Lanigan hosts it, and he goes about finding props, finding costumes, reuniting them with actors and designers, and even going through restorations of some of these props. And so each one is just one movie theme. So I think it's just perfect because it's a 30-minute episodes, give or take. They get right in, and each one starts rolling as soon as the episode starts and doesn't let go.
Yeah, and you did mention that they, unlike I think everything else on Disney Plus, they decided for some reason to release the entire season all at once instead of the weekly thing. How do you feel about that? Do you like that, or do you prefer the weekly drip?
You know, I was getting used to the weekly release dates, and they still do it for pretty much every other show. Clone Wars just had its final episode on May 4th, so it was kind of cool to be able to binge it all again, because that's how Netflix does it. But at the same time, like, I do wish that I had more to see now. Like, exactly. I got through all 8 episodes so quickly, and I'm like, I need more now.
Yeah, exactly. That's the problem with it. As a consumer, I love it. As a creator, I would hate it, because it's like I just spent a year on this, and now it's all out there. But it's interesting. It's there's been a lot of conversation as whether or not even Netflix is thinking about going to the weekly thing now for that very reason. I know, like, the creators of Stranger Things has had a lot to say about, it's really frustrating because people want more the second it's released, and it's like, that was 3 years of work that you just watched in one day. So I get it, but in any case, you did mention the host Dan Lanigan. This guy is great. Did you know him before this, or?
Honestly, no. This is the first time I was ever introduced to who he is, and he's an amazing presenter, great host, has a great personality, very knowledgeable, of course, and especially because of his history with prop collecting.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I'm pretty sure, if I had to guess, he pitched this show to Disney Plus, because it very much feels like his show in that sense. Yeah. Now, he does have a collection of his own, a pretty massive collection. In fact, you can go to his website, raiderofTheLostProps.com, and check out, some of the stuff he has. But he definitely has a hand in the industry. You can tell by the way he's talking to the people he's interviewing and stuff. Like, he has not only a lot of knowledge about it, but he definitely has connections within the industry. I know I checked his IMDb real quickly. I saw he's an executive producer on Mystery Science Theater 3000. So he's definitely been around this stuff. And I love that he's like super passionate about it. Passion is one of the most appealing things on earth, but he's not fangirly about it. It's not like he's having a fit over these crazy, amazing things he's getting to see and do, but he's super appreciative and passionate. And frankly, as much as I would love to host this show, he's the perfect host for this show. He's really, really, really good. I like him. Agreed.
And then there was one moment, and we'll talk about it, I'm sure, where he does fanboy a little bit, but for good reason, because of who he was talking to.
Yeah. So it is funny, though, when I first heard about this show, I did think a little bit like childhood flashback to, I don't know about you, but wherever I went on vacation with my family, we had to go to the nearest Planet Hollywood. And it was only because of me that my family was dragged to these different locations. But did you get that feeling at all? Because I was just like, this is like, a Planet Hollywood expedition.
Honestly, yeah. I was not really I didn't know what I was going to expect watching this show. I knew they were going to showcase props and things from these films that we knew and love, but I wasn't like fully expecting how in depth they were going to get in terms of the history and the making of these props and talking to these people that built these props. So I love that element. Yes, seeing the props was cool, but learning stories about how important the props were and what came together to make these props and costumes. That's what I really loved about the show.
Yeah, and they really do, like, it's not just like, hey, we're going to find a prop. They do different things. Some of it is discovering props. Some of it is actually refurbishing the props. Some of it is, these guests that they have on. So there's a bunch of different elements to it, plus visits to the Walt Disney Archives warehouse, which, let's just say, you could watch this series over and over again and just find hidden gems in the background of the Walt Disney Archives. I found one of the episodes, the giant flat Pinocchio that was used in Fantasmic Out Here, was just like
really
in the background of a very 2-second clip, and I was like, I know exactly what that is. And I was like, kind of a random thing to be held at archives, to be honest. I would assume that would be a piece that would just be demolished. It was way bigger than I ever expected it to be. And Yeah, it was cool. There's just a lot of stuff in the backgrounds of the archives that you can watch over and over and find out all these different little things. But let's go through these episodes. We're going to kind of have Cliff Notes versions of these episodes. We won't hit upon every single beat, but just some of our favorite little moments on the show. And the first movie that they start with is Mary Poppins. Of course, the original classic. And yeah, there was one thing about this episode. I love this episode, but I gotta say it was a very, let me just start. This may be the first episode. This is not the first one I watched. This is a series you can easily watch out of order, although my obsessive compulsive self would normally be like, nope, I'm watching 1 through 8 in a row. But there was a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids episode that I skipped to. So when I hopped back, you did the same thing.
Oh, yeah, that was number 1 for me.
Okay, cool. So when we go back to the first episode, it was Mary Poppins. One little thing that I thought was a very strange way to begin this series was the fact that the first thing they really talk about is the Mary Poppins umbrella with like the parrot head cane. And I thought that was a weird thing to start with because they start by saying, we don't know what happened to the original. And basically they made another one out of the same cast or something. But it's like, that's a very strange, interesting choice to start a series about authentic props by saying we don't have this one. I just thought that was weird.
I guess it's kind of a juxtaposition of that a lot of props are going to get destroyed and you're not going to find all of them. So they want to showcase like, hey, yeah, we're showcasing props, but sometimes we just can't find the actual props from these movies because for one way or another they either got lost or got destroyed. So I do kind of appreciate it. They showcase that element of it where yeah, it may not be the exact same prop, but it was made from the same cast the original prop was made from. So I understand where you're coming from, but I do kind of like that they showed that aspect of prop collecting.
The thing that I like about it is that they're honest about it, because I have seen, going back to the Planet Hollywood story, I can remember as a kid being at like one Planet Hollywood and then going to one on the other side of the country and being like, didn't I see that exact same prop in that other planet? So when it comes to Planet Hollywood, I don't know this for certain, but I think there were a lot of copycat replicas and stuff like that. And so I really did appreciate, there were a couple moments within prop culture where they're like, okay, this is authentic, this part of it, this part is not, this was refurbed and stuff. And I loved that about it because I feel like in a lot of cases, and frankly, I'm going to give that credit to Dan Lanigan. I have no idea if it was him who was like, no, we got to be completely honest about this or not. But I do feel like in a lot of cases, people would have just been like, yeah, that's the one. That's the one. So I appreciate that honesty. That was cool.
Yeah, because that's very much something they could easily fake and be like, oh yeah, this is all 100% authentic. Like the shrink ray from the Honey episode we'll talk about, is not all 100%, but they could have said it's 100%, but they were very honest with like what parts didn't come from the original. And yeah, like I love that they mentioned that.
Yeah, it's very cool. So in the Mary Poppins episode, did you have any favorite little moments or things that they showed?
Let me tell you. So Mary Poppins episode, it starts off with the umbrella, but once they get past the umbrella, and I believe the snow globe was next after that, the whole episode just becomes a huge emotional like ball for me, because like from the snow globe to the end credits, I don't think I had a dry eye. Everything made me want to cry. All the visuals that you saw, the reunions that you saw, I can't really pick out one moment. If I were to pick out one moment, it would be seeing Richard Sherman in Walt Disney's office playing the piano, playing Feed the Birds and singing it, and just hearing him mention that he's the only one that's allowed to play that piano is, that just gives me chills.
Yeah, that was cool. Now, I'd been in that office before, and I never heard that Richard Sherman was the only person allowed to play that piano, but I think that that's very fitting. And in the episode, the original snow globe from the original film is sitting on the piano. So I actually went back and looked at some of my photos from when I went to Walt's office to be like, was that snow globe there? I don't remember that. And in my photos, it was not. Who knows? Like right now, I know it's part of a display. Either that or maybe it's the Saving Mr. Banks replica, or Mary Poppins Returns replica, rather. I'm not 100% sure, that the one that's on tour. But when I went to Walt's office, it wasn't there. But it was very cool. It was a great story about how that original one from the first film, was found in a janitor's closet.
Right. Spent so many years in there.
Like, that's crazy. That means somebody threw it out, because I'm gonna believe that the janitor didn't steal it from anywhere. It was thrown away, and he just kept it in the closet. And then years later, someone who's like, yeah, we need that back, essentially. So, like, that's a crazy story. And, now it's an official piece of the Walt Disney Archives. And from what I understand, one of the most prized possessions of the Walt Disney Archives. So,
I mean... And they mentioned it several times in that episode and a few other episodes. Back in the day, when they made Mary Poppins, there was no thought about these props and costumes. It's like, all right, we're done. Get rid of them. That's it. It wasn't as important of an element as it is today.
Well, listen, you don't know when something's going to be a hit, right? I mean,
right.
It is very, very interesting. And of course, the archives didn't exist back when Mary Poppins was being made. So it's all very interesting. The Peter Ellenshaw paintings that they showed, which are super iconic from that original film, were very cool. I learned something about Mary Poppins I didn't know, that originally that whole penguin sequence was actually cast to be humans in tuxedos. I didn't realize that. When they mentioned that, I'd never heard that before.
I think, what was something that and I don't know why I didn't know this, but when they were showcasing the carousel horses in the archives, showing that the horses were modeled to look like Dick Van Dyke and Julie Andrews, for some reason I was like, I didn't actually know that. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, there are a lot of fun facts in there, and even for diehard Disney fans, there'll be a lot of all right, cool, I like that. I did think it was funny that choreographer Dee Wood stole a bristle from the chimney sweep room. I was like, is she really good?
After all these years, I was just sitting there like, you know what, you deserve it. Go ahead.
So, oh my god, that was funny. The carpet bag story I thought was amazing. The archives now has the original carpet bag. This guy, Dan Lanigan, I guess, helped get it back to the archives, to its rightful owner. But the reason they didn't have it is because they threw a contest back when Mary Poppins was originally released, and first prize was the carpet bag, Mary Poppins carpet bag from the movie, filled with $10,000 cash. Now, when the winner received the prize, he didn't want the bag, he just wanted the cash, so he took the cash out, and the person who was delivering the prize kept the carpet bag in their attic for so many years. And it was discovered, and now it's back in the Walt Disney Archives. I was like, what a story. And it is so crazy and interesting to me how many of these items that, rightfully belong to Disney or belonged to Disney at one point are just out in the world now. And, they have to buy them back or get them back somehow. That's so interesting.
It makes you wonder, how many people out there probably are sitting on something that is very significant to Disney's history or even any film's history, and maybe they see a show like this and they're like, hold on a second, do I have something like that? Who knows how many things could be discovered because people see shows like this and turn in the stuff they've been sitting on.
Yeah, well, I don't think people will be turning it in so much as maybe trying to make a few dollars off of it.
True.
But
I'd like to see the good.
yeah. So one of the things, you mentioned the horses earlier, and the Mary Poppins horse is in pristine condition. The Walt Disney Archives have held on to it for all these years, but the Bert horse is in really bad shape. And this horse was recently reacquired by the Walt Disney Archives, and these two pieces really bring up an interesting point, because as I mentioned throughout this series, in some cases we see that they restore the pieces if they're in bad shape. And then in other cases, like this Bert horse, they're just preserving it in its current state, even though it's, a bit ruined and destroyed through the years. But they're just going to keep it as is in the best shape they can. And how do you feel about this? Do you have a preference? And I don't really know how they decide which they're going to do, but do you have a preference? Would you rather see it be brought back to its glory or just be as is?
I mean, it's hard to even think about that, because you worry, depending on how bad of a condition they are, even if they were to start, doing any sort of repaintings or basically touching it, it could fall apart and be unsalvageable. So I guess it just depends on how deteriorated it is. I would love to see them bring things back to life, because they could take them out on tour or put them out on display instead of just sitting in a box decrepit. But at the same time, like you want to make sure you keep those in case maybe at some point in the future they have the technology or the means to be able to bring it back to life instead of trying now and it might not work.
Maybe it's like a percentage study or something. Like they figure out what percent of it would remain actual, the original form, and if it's like they'd have to touch it up too much or something, like at that point, is it really even the original anymore? I don't know. It'd be an interesting thing to find out. But yeah, speaking of that, anything else you want to add about Mary Poppins before we move on to the next movie?
I mean, just like seeing the actress who played Jane Banks reunite with her costume and how emotional that was. I just love that. Like it is just a costume, but for people like her, like this was her childhood. This was growing up, and seeing something in person again after so many years I thought that was a really cool element of this episode.
We see people reunited with their costumes quite a bit in this series, and the thing that always makes me laugh is they're always like, "Oh, I was so little." It's like, well, of course you were. Did you think you were always adult size? It's so funny.
Right.
I was so little. Anyway, let's move on to the second episode, which was Tron, which I gotta be honest, I've never seen this movie. So
neither have I, honestly.
Okay. And I have zero interest, to be completely frank. And this episode didn't change my mind. It was a great episode. It's just I can tell by what they show, like the clips, I'm like, this ain't my cup of tea. I can appreciate its place in history and Miss Electronica at Disney California Adventure, but I have no desire to see Tron.
It just really showed like how little things that they had from the movie, because, you know, it's a movie that was primarily digital, except for like some costumes and some props. But that's one of the things that I liked about this episode, even though I've never seen the film and really don't have big of an interest in Tron. The showcasing them examining this one prop and trying to determine if it belonged to Jeff Bridges' character or another character. I liked that. I liked seeing the thought process of trying to like study the photos and see, okay, so that piece matches that matches that. We still don't know. We still got to do some more studying about it. I like them showing that.
Yeah, they definitely do quite a bit of detective work on these shows, which is really fun, and they definitely discover some stuff along the way. As I was mentioning before, the restoration of the Mary Poppins horses, they actually do restore something in this episode with Flynn's neon sign for Flynn's Arcade. And that thing was in some pretty rough shape, I would say. And they restore it to its former glory. And, you know, it's great to see it lit up and stuff. There's actually, in Las Vegas, there's this place called the Neon Retro Graveyard. Have you heard of this?
Yes, I have.
Very cool, and it reminded me of that because it's all the old Vegas neon signs, and they've restored some of them, and you know, to see them just sitting there dying is so sad. So I was happy to see this thing, even though I've never seen the movie. I was still like, oh, cool, what a cool prop or sign.
Mm-hmm. And of course, having your guest stars, like having Bruce Boxleiter, who played Tron, come in and see parts of his costume again, and being in an arcade with the Tron arcade next to them. That was a cool little element. That's one of the elements I really love about a lot of these episodes are the guest stars that they bring in. Either they're from the movies like Bruce was, or they're just people who were fans. Like in the Mary Poppins episode, they had, I believe it was Erin Andrews, who was just a big Mary Poppins fan. They just brought her in to see the stuff. I like that element because it added a little more of like, oh, I know this person.
Yeah. And they did bring in the director of Tron with this one, Steven Lisberger. And I had to laugh because, you know, he was showing some Tron stuff that he had, but it was like in a tent in his backyard. It seemed like it was very, very much not well protected. It's
funny, some boxes. Yep.
Yeah. From one extreme to the other, you have like this lockdown Walt Disney Archives to, I guess, this tent in my backyard. It's got some stuff in it. I haven't opened it in years. Let's see what I got in here. It was a lot of like toys and crew stuff, I noticed. But some interesting choices as far as the movies chosen. They definitely seem to be movies that the host was a big fan of. But to search for props in a movie that, like you said, was very digital is kind of an odd choice. And even a little later on, there's some movies that were like mostly animated that I'm like, it's kind of a hard prop hunt, but still some cool finds along the way. You do get into artwork a lot. And that actually leads us into the third movie, The Nightmare Before Christmas, which of course has these amazing maquettes and, you know, stop motion figures and such. I'm going to assume like everyone, you're a fan of this film?
You know what? I'm going to surprise everyone. I am a fan now, but when this movie first came out in the 90s, I was scared to death of this movie. I refused
that's fair enough. That's fair
to watch
enough.
it. Like, there were some visuals that I saw in the trailers and commercials that made me have literal nightmares, and I refused to see this movie.
What were some of the visuals?
I think, if I remember correctly, I do remember correctly, it was the visual of the kids opening their presents for Christmas and the horrific looking things coming out. That scared just scared me so much as a kid, and I didn't watch the movie until I was well into my adulthood.
That's funny. No, I actually saw this movie in theaters. I remember seeing it in theaters, and yeah, it's a great little film, and of course it has a huge cult following at this point. And one of the cool things, and I know you're a huge Disney MGM fan as well, maybe you remember this, I'm not sure, but when this movie came out, a lot of the stuff that we saw on this episode was on display at Disney MGM Studios.
No, I did not remember that. I only went to studios 4 times in the 90s, and I don't remember any of the Nightmare Before Christmas stuff there.
I don't know where they put it. It was like in a separate room of some sort, probably the finale of the tour or something like that. But there was a large space, or at least I remember it as a large space when I was a kid, with a lot of these models. And it was kind of cool. It was a very nice display, and it was, a big hit at the time. And it was fun to see all that stuff again and be like, gosh, I just remember seeing that in the park, so that's pretty cool. One of the things I found really fascinating was one of the original Jack maquettes was brought out, and this was kind of the first one, and they were still developing Jack's look, but I gotta say, it barely changed, if at all. And so kind of from the very beginning with Tim Burton's sketch of Jack to that first maquette, this movie knew what it was from the very start, which is pretty uncommon.
And one of the things that I had no idea about is that they were talking to the screenwriter, and she said her first draft of the script, that was it.
And she wrote it in a week. I think she said she wrote it in a week. She wrote a script in a week. Granted, it's a short movie, but still. A script in a week based on Tim Burton's story. And then they used that first draft. And apparently, she was dating Danny Elfman at the time, and he was not a fan of that script. So I thought that was kind of funny.
Speaking of...
speaking of Danny Elfman, he's in this episode. He is a cool maquette figure of Jack in his Santa costume, which I guess he's been taking care of through the years. And it's going to be kind of cool just to have that in your living room and know that it was like actually in the movie.
And it's one of the things, another thing that I learned is that I had no idea like just how much upkeep is involved in keeping these maquettes and these figures intact. Because Danny Elfman was talking about like every, I think 2 to 3 years, he has to go in and have someone work on it because the stuff starts melting and like deteriorating.
Yeah, I always think about that when it's related to theme parks, especially because the one that always comes to mind is like the dinosaurs of Jurassic Park, where, those figures just started falling apart after they were used because they're made to look as realistic as possible for the time they're being filmed. And realistic often means, soft materials and stuff if you're talking about skin and muscle. But then to have to translate that into a theme park attraction is so fascinating because you need basically the complete opposite, but people expect things to look as realistic as they do in the films. So it's always interesting to think about how fragile the movie version is versus how hardcore the attraction version of these things must be. So it is interesting. In addition to Danny Elfman, who's the singing voice of Jack, we also got Chris Sarandon, who a lot of people know as Prince Humperdinck in The Princess Bride, who I actually didn't realize he was the speaking voice of Jack in the film. I knew it was a different actor, but I didn't realize it was him. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, and watching his little reunion with it was like seeing an old friend again. He was like treating it like, hello, Jack, hello, my friend, how are you? He was talking to it. It was so cute.
It is funny how the relationships that a lot of these performers have with whatever it is they're being reunited with. Some people get very emotional over it. Some people, like, honestly don't seem to have too much of a reaction, and then some are like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like, it's quite a range of emotions that people are showing when they're being reunited with these things, and it's just interesting how it hits people differently. One of the coolest things I thought was the moving spiral hill, because
Yes.
just when they showed like the backside of it and the mechanics of how that moving hill actually worked, and oh my gosh, the process of stop motion, as much as I enjoy it as a viewer, I could never do that as a career.
No.
I don't have the patience for that.
And they touch upon it a little bit in the Honey episode of how they do the stop motion. And I was just sitting there like, oh man, I don't know if I could just do that, because like 24 of those for just 1 second, that's a long working day.
It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. And of course, the director of The Nightmare Before Christmas, Henry Selick, makes an appearance in this, and he has a very cool figure in his home of Jack as, the Santa Claus version of Jack in the sleigh with all of the reindeer and Zero and stuff, and it very cool. And I loved the trick or treat story he told. Do you remember this? Go ahead and tell that.
Yeah, so basically every Halloween, when he has trick-or-treaters come up, if they're dressed as characters from The Nightmare Before Christmas, he'll be like, hey, you want to see something really cool? And he'll bring them in the house and show them the maquette up like above his fireplace or on his mantle somewhere. And I love that. Just how much he loves this movie and still appreciates it to this day.
After that episode being released now, he's going to have like 30-year-olds showing up at his door dressed as Nightmare Before Christmas characters being like,
Yep.
So yeah, you got something to show me? It's funny. So after The Nightmare Before Christmas, we got Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl, which at first I was like, this isn't old enough to have like, relics of props and such. And then I was like, oh, it's kind of old. 2003, I think the movie was released.
Yeah, 2003. Yeah.
17 years ago. So, oh my gosh. Well, I can remember this being in theaters. But they did go to St. Vincent Island, where a lot of the film was shot. And it was kind of cool to see the stuff that was left behind there. They had some major set pieces kind of left behind in old bars and stuff. And that was kind of cool. In fact, the costume designer ended up moving there, or at least buying a vacation home at St. Vincent. And so we saw a lot of those classic costumes.
Yeah, I think my favorite story from this episode is one of the bar owners. They have the mast that Johnny Depp sails in at the beginning of the film as it's sinking into the ocean. And they kept that mast and they have it cemented inside the bar because she overheard someone talk about stealing it, which I'm like, how are you going to steal that giant thing? But yeah, so she cemented it so no one can take it.
One of the funniest things I learned in the show is the whole Jack Sparrow's hat being like dipped in rubber because he was throwing it overboard so much. And number one, it was just getting soaked and destroyed. But number two, it would float this way. I was like, that is really smart. I'd never heard of such a thing.
And it looks great. You can't really even tell that it's rubber.
No, it looks totally on point. So very smart, whoever thought of that.
I think my favorite hat story has to be costume designer talking about Jeffrey Rush.
Oh, yeah.
Coming in for the first day, and she's like, I have a lineup of hats here for your character. You pick one. And he's like, I don't wear hats. And so she left and comes back, and he's sitting there wearing a hat, and he's like, I like this.
Yeah, and it became very iconic for that character. Now, this was another one of those episodes where they were very, very honest about something, because they showed the giant Black Pearl model, and the host mentioned, goes, oh, so this is from all three films? And there's like the guy showing it was like, only from 2 and 3, because I guess after number 1, they had a bit of a redesign. And once again, this is one of those moments where they could have lied and nobody would have known, but I love the fact that they were completely honest about it, and I think that that's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think they said the first Black Pearl wasn't really made to float in water, the model. And they needed one for 2 and 3 that floated in water, so they had to do a complete redesign and rebuild. The story about the tall ships I thought was really interesting, how they basically rented these tall ships to have kind of just in the backgrounds of shots and stuff, but they painted each side of them different colors so that they could flip them around and make it look like there were more than there actually were. I was like, that was really stupid, simple, smart. I love that. That was great. I will say, in all honesty, this episode is probably one of my 2 least favorites of the season. Okay. I love the movie. It's one of my favorite movies, but I just feel like it didn't really show a lot. There wasn't really a lot of, the big guest stars that other episodes would have. There wasn't really a lot of props. It was mainly just a few pieces of costume and some of the ships. But yeah, so I feel like it was kind of lacking in terms of some of the stuff that other episodes show.
I think I could be wrong. Let me look through my list here. But is it not the newest of the movies too? Oh, Narnia is maybe
Narnia
newer.
is, yeah.
Which is another one that I didn't really care about. But
yeah.
But yeah, I see. I get what you're saying. I'm not a huge fan of the movie, so I thought like kind of my slight disconnect to the episode, which I still thought was pretty interesting. But if if I didn't care as much as some of the others, I was just like, because I'm not a huge fan of the film, I thought. But they do end the episode at Disneyland because I'm sure it was funny. They showed the Aztec chest that is part of the attraction as you're going through the caves with the skeletons and you get to the room where that skeleton pirate is on the top of the pile of gold. You do ride by an Aztec chest. It is the one used in the movie. And I did love how they were like, not pretending, but they're like, oh my gosh, incredible. I'm like, I literally hear somebody point that out every single time I'm on the ride. I'm like, somebody on the boat's going to be like, that's from the movie.
I did like the story of them installing it and it had a false bottom and they found a coin with a blood stain on it. Yeah. And they're like, could this have been one of the ones that they used in the movie to drop?
Perhaps. But let's move on to episode 5, I believe. Mm-hmm. The most important episode of the series. Frankly, this could have been a 2-hour special, and I would have been fine with that. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
But like you said, like I said, this is the immediate go-to first one we're watching.
This is actually how I discovered that this show existed, because the Shrink Ray, I was at the Bowers Museum in Orange County, California, and I was going through the museum. It was a press day, and I was just looking at things, taking pictures of things. I was probably 20 feet away from the Shrink Ray, and I didn't see it at all. I was just focused on looking at what I was looking at, and all of a sudden I hear somebody just say the word Shrink Ray, and my head darted to the right so fast, and I let out such a giddy squeal that it really shouldn't be done in a museum, especially in front of like the head of Walt Disney Archives. I will say that Becky was very sweet about my reaction to it, but it was pretty childish and I couldn't stop staring. So at that point, I was told about this series, Prop Culture, and how they're restoring it. And they're like, oh yeah, and right around the corner, they interviewed Rick Moranis. And I was like, what? And like, yeah, you can watch a clip of it around the corner. And I'm like, oh my God. And that's how I learned about this show, Prop Culture. I hadn't heard about it before then. And I was like, well, if there's a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids episode, I'm hooked. And frankly, the little clips that they were showing in the museum were fantastic. So it got me stoked.
Yeah, I remember seeing your footage when it was being sent to us because we featured your footage on an episode of the Attraction Show on our Attractions Magazine YouTube channel if anyone wants to go check that out. Yeah, just like seeing that footage and seeing the close-ups of it just brought me back to my childhood. Just because like this movie was a huge part of my growing up. Like I remember this film vividly, seeing it in theaters, and then I remember seeing so much of it when I went to MGM Studios with the playground and other parts of the backlot tour. So like I was just so stoked to be able to see, because there's not really that many behind-the-scenes looks at this film out there.
There's a really great making of that was on Disney Channel that I really wish they would release on Disney Plus. They did show some clips of it during this episode, and I reckon I have it burned to DVD because I'm that kind of guy. But I loved this making of special hosted by Rick Moranis, and I just wish they'd put it on Disney Plus. I know that there's this concern on Disney Plus of, oh, we need to make sure that the quality's upgraded and stuff. No, you don't. Please. No. Just put this stuff out there as it was originally aired. I'm fine with it. So is everybody else. We just want this content on Disney Plus. So it was pretty cool. But, you know, I was kind of just surprised that this Shrink Ray still existed. It's one of those props that, number one, I was very surprised to find out that it was the same Shrink Ray in all 3 films.
Yeah, I had no idea.
That shocked me because they do look considerably different. And on top of that, it's just kind of uncommon. I get it from a production standpoint, it saves money to use the same prop, but it's, you know, there's like how many DeLoreans that exist from Back to the Future? There's like 10 of them or something. You know, it's not uncommon to have multiples of these big set pieces. So I was very surprised to hear that. And when we first see it, since the most recent film it was used in was the direct-to-video Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves, that's what it looked like. It looked like the Honey We Shrunk Ourselves shrink ray, which is a considerably different look. And in this episode, they do restore it to its original glory from the original film, and they do a fantastic job with it.
Oh yeah, and that's immediately how the episode starts and ends. I loved him taking the shrink ray to his friend to kind of see how they can restore it, and explaining the parts that they can use, and we're going to 3D print this part, and this part comes from this dictation machine from the 60s. And I just loved that, seeing that process of restoring it, because it could have just been all right, we're going to take it off and you don't see it again until the end of the episode. But to show those parts that they're going to do, I just love that.
Yeah. Now, they did mention, and I don't ever remember this, maybe you do, but they did mention that this was on display at one point at Disney MGM Studios. I don't remember that.
I've been trying to wrap my brain around it. If it was on display, it obviously was not in the playground. It could have been somewhere on the backlot tour.
It was probably the finale. Remember, like the finale used to always be like kind of a prop room or a costumes room or something.
Yeah,
it was probably in there, but
it was probably I was thinking the room they used to have a blue screen with the giant bumblebee that they'd pick volunteers out.
Oh,
to ride
that's
on the bumblebee.
True. They could have just had it in there. You're right.
It could have been there.
Yeah. Probably. You want to hear something crazy? I actually didn't see this movie on the big screen as a kid. Because,
really?
Yeah, I only saw it on the big screen for the first time, I think about 3 or 4 years ago. And it was showing. Remember when Disney was doing like those kind of themed week of movies or something?
Yes, I'm vaguely remembering this.
Yeah, and it was at like very random movie theaters. I actually had to drive about an hour, but Honey, I Shrunk the Kids was one of the movies, and I was like, there's no way I'm not, like, it's not a movie that's shown very often on the big screen. So I was like, I gotta go, and it was so much fun to watch it on the big screen, because even as a person who's watched the movie a billion times, I was definitely noticing stuff I'd never noticed before. And I was like, This is fantastic. It's so much fun.
I mean, all 3 films are available on Disney Plus now, so I got to imagine that, I don't know, maybe they'll do like a nice restoration on the film at some point in the future, especially if these plans for a reboot sequel come into play.
Yeah, it's nice to see, even like just this episode of the show gives me hope. Like, there definitely seems to be very much how, a couple years ago we started getting that Hocus Pocus resurgence of the company kind of recognizing the fact that this is a classic movie. It feels like we're in that, at the beginning stages of that right now with Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. And I love that. So let's keep that ball rolling for sure.
I have to imagine that the creation of this episode might have some close ties to the pre-production for Shrunk, because the fact this episode involved Joe Johnston, who's going to supposedly direct this new film, and Rick Moranis is going to be in the film. Maybe there was some sort of like, either this episode was filmed first and they kind of be like, ooh, we would like to work on this again, or maybe the deal of them working on this new movie, they worked on this show. I have a feeling these are connected somehow.
Some synergistic way, yeah. Most likely. As you said, Joe Johnston, the original director, was in it. That's very cool. I loved how homemade the shrink ray was. That was something I never really... I mean, I knew it. I'd recognized it, but I don't know. This really showed the details, and even being able to see it up close and personal. I'm like, wow, this really was made in some crazy scientist's attic with like things he could find around the house, and it's just so much fun. I love it so much. But the baseball, the very famous baseball that blocked that laser so that the kids could be shrunk, was it one of the prop handlers?
Yeah, I think it was the prop master. He still had it in this little glass ball case. It was autographed by the entire cast and still had that burn mark.
Yeah. And that was kind of cool to see that. And then the miniatures were very cool. The miniature puppets of like the kids and stuff that they would use for some pre-visualization. And some moments in the film did use miniatures as well when like they're flying on the bee and stuff. So to see that stuff, like, super delicate at this point, because that's like over 30 years ago now, which is crazy.
But even like seeing the stop motion Auntie and the Scorpion, they still look really good, and they're handling them like they shot it yesterday. Like, they're still in pretty good condition.
Auntie was in very good shape, I felt like. And oh gosh, I wish I would kill. Oh my God. And one of the background shots of a future episode of this series, I want to see like Auntie from the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids movie set adventure at Disney MGM Studios in the background. Like, because I have a feeling he was destroyed and that makes me so sad.
God, I hope not. For those who don't know, I have a really big connection to that playground. I spent a year of my cast member life working the playground at Hollywood Studios when it became Hollywood Studios. So that it just adds to my love of this film is being able to work in that playground and seeing Auntie every morning and cleaning him and making sure he's good to go for the day. I have a photo of me and my daughter the last day the playground was open before it closed on Auntie. I miss that little ant so much.
I'm not going to lie. I made a couple of phone calls when they announced they were closing that and called some people at Imagineering and was like, hey, is there anything? And I was told pretty much dumpster. The thing I really wanted was the blueprint sign at the entrance that said Honey, I Shrunk the Kids movie set. That was the thing I really, really, really wanted. And I mean, they could have been lying to me, but these were people I knew, so I don't think they would have lied to me. They they would have just told me the truth if I couldn't get it. But I was really trying. I really wanted something from that thing. Oh, yeah. So good. In any case, let's get back to the show. Now, oh gosh, a moment. Talk about a heartbreaker here. And Auntie. Oh. We get the actors Thomas Brown, Amy O'Neill, and Jared Rushton, who played 3 of the 4 kids in the movie. And they are reunited with the, in very bad shape, head of Auntie. The full-size Auntie. And it's one of those things, when you look at it, you immediately know what it is, but oh god, it's basically the underneath metal parts. Yeah, it's a skeleton of Auntie's head only. Ugh.
Yeah, because they had like a full-size one for them to ride on, and this is all that's left of it. They don't know what happened to the rest of it, just destroyed over time, but it was kind of cool to see that there were still little bits of like the hair attached on the antenna.
Yeah. It was cool to see that, and the kids' reactions when they saw it, even from a far distance, they're like, "Oh my gosh, is it Auntie?" And I'm like, "Yes, it is Auntie! Oh my god!" It's so good.
And I don't know if you noticed this. Someone pointed this out to me, and I need to go back and look. But the actor, I'm forgetting his name, who played the younger brother,
who played Russ. That was Jared Rushton. Yeah.
Someone mentioned to me that Jared has like on his belt, or he's holding what looks to be the hat that he wore as the character that he may have kept, but they don't mention it, but there's like a wide shot where you can kind of see the hat supposedly. So I want to go back and see if that's true, because that'd be cool. It probably was something they may have cut out for time length in the episode.
That's cool. Yeah, I didn't notice that either. Now, they do go visit Phil Tippett, Phil Tippett is a master stop-motion creator. He worked on Jurassic Park before that film was supposed to be, CG dinosaurs.
The dinosaur supervisor.
Yeah, he was supposed to actually do stop-motion dinos for that film. Mm-hmm. And then it was ultimately decided to go CG. But Phil Tippett's a master at this stuff. I didn't realize he worked on the scorpion sequences in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. And he has the scorpion still, and he was kind of showing the process. So that was really, really cool. But let's just get to it. The most important part of this entire series. Rick Moranis appears in this for a nice little interview where he's reunited with his glasses and a broken calculator watch from the film. And, he just seems like the greatest guy. I just want to interview him so badly. I love him. Oh my gosh.
He is an idol of mine. As much as, this film was a big part of my life, him as an actor was a big part of me growing up. Like Little Shop, Spaceballs, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. I played Seymour my senior year of high school in a production of Little Shop. So like I have a really big connection to him, and he's just someone that I look up to. And like going into this episode, like, of course you said you got to see a little clip of this before the series even came out. I had no idea. I went into this episode not knowing what was coming. And when he says the words, I just got word that the star agreed to talk to us. I'm like, jaw.
Yeah.
Like, because it's so rare to see, it's so rare to hear from Rick Moranis these days, let alone see him in a video interview.
Yeah, it was pretty great, and he seems really appreciative of this stuff, which is cool because it could be easy to think like, oh, he's distant because he doesn't care and all that stuff, and that doesn't seem to be the case. He just seems to be very private but super appreciative, and also just super grounded. Like realizes that the stuff he did isn't the most important thing in life. He left the business for all the right reasons, to take care of his family and all that stuff. And he just seems like a good, genuine guy. In fact, he mentioned some of the stuff that he would take from sets was always a pair of glasses because they were prescription glasses. I was like, that's genius. This man literally never had to buy glasses because he just had his movie glasses. And then he mentioned he had some 8x10s, and he goes, yeah, I'd give them away for charities. And, if fans wrote in, I actually heard a story once that he gave away his Ghostbuster, the jumpsuit, to a fan that asked for it. He was like, sure, it's just sitting in my closet. You can have it. And I was just like, wow, what a generous soul. But he did mention, he's like, there's nothing left. He's like, I've given everything away from my movies. And I don't know. He's going to have a resurgence. I have a feeling. And
I think so too.
I think a whole new generation of people are going to discover him, and he's amazing. That's all I can say. I could go on and on and on about Rick Moranis. So shall we move on, or anything else you want to add about Honey, I Shrunk the Kids?
It just the whole episode from beginning to end, smile from ear to ear. Revisiting my childhood, seeing these people again and these props again. It really does make me much more excited for this Shrunk reboot because it just feels like all the right people are going to be involved. It's not just going to be like a money grab. They're going to get Rick, they're going to get Joe, and it just feels like they're going to do the right things.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. Scared and excited. So then we have the Chronicles of Narnia, which I've got to admit, never seen this one either. How about you?
I remember seeing it once, and I saw it in the theater, but that's the only time I ever saw it. So I never really had a connection to it more than just, the trailers, seeing it once, and then, when they had the displays at MGM Studios and Hollywood Studios for the films, that's the connection that I have. That's about it.
Yeah, since I hadn't seen the film, I didn't connect with this much, but there were a couple things I wanted to point out. We do see this giant sleigh from the film, but more importantly, in the background, we have one of the ride vehicles from Francis's Ladybug Boogie from A Bug's Land, which was right next to this giant, this very authentic sleigh from Narnia, and then just tacky, bright, giant ladybug. I thought the juxtaposition was hilarious, but that was a not-so-hidden gem in the background there for that episode. Right. And then the other thing that really stood out to me were these animal head masks that human actors had to wear that were robotic and stuff, and I guess would overheat a lot. Those were really beautiful, and a lot of detail on those. But other than that, I didn't care for this episode all that much, to be completely honest.
No, it was down there with Pirates is my least favorite, but still, just because I say least favorite doesn't mean I don't like it. It's still a really cool look into the process of making this movie. They show some really good behind the scenes of filming it. And then I kind of liked the exchange that Dan had with his friend, where he was like, all right, if you let me borrow this, I'll give you. And they're making a trade from collector to collector. I liked seeing that.
I mean, that sort of stuff I think happened off camera, and they just recreate. I'm sure that was discussion that was had long before he showed up. But, they recreate those moments for TV, and that's fine. But let's move on to a very cool film, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. This was super cool to see Andreas Deja, who I love. And I actually didn't realize he worked on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but he's, a Disney legend and an animator, and he just sits down and draws Roger like it's nothing. And I was like, oh, gosh, to have those skills must be incredible. Right? And it was really interesting to see a little later on in the episode the original Roger Rabbit designs and how he looked considerably different. Some of the original concept art, unlike, we were talking about how Jack Skellington looked pretty much the same, this not so much.
Yeah, he had a much more prominent nose in the early designs. The early designs really felt more cartoony than the Roger that we ended up getting.
Yeah, he was definitely like more snuggly, if that's the right word. Like he was kind of cuter and stuff in the original design. So it was interesting to see that. Very surprised to see Kathleen Turner in this, just because she seems like one of those, she's kind of, royalty in some way, shape, or form as an actress. And I wouldn't think she would want to return to something to talk about Jessica Rabbit, but it was pretty cool to see her. She seems to really like the film and the character, which surprised me.
And one of the parts of that interview that I learned, and I had no idea, is because he showed her, Dan showed her the newspaper headline, and the design of Jessica is completely different in that headline than the actual film Jessica, because they had to print that out before they actually started drawing Jessica into the film. So it's in the film. The final film has that different design of her in that headline. I never knew that.
Yeah, I'd never noticed that either. That was super interesting. And then Christopher Lloyd. Talk about another... Oh my gosh, put Rick Moranis and Christopher Lloyd in a movie together and I'd be in heaven. Christopher Lloyd is in his 80s now.
And still just sharp as a nail, too. I love the fact they start off doing a shaven haircut.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
Yeah. And, he was reunited with his Judge Doom costume. And he seemed really delighted to see it. And he even said, I wish I was still wearing it. He seems to have some nice memories. Of course, Robert Zemeckis directed this film, who also directed Back to the Future. So he has a great relationship with the director of this film. But one thing that was mentioned during this, and they showed a little behind the scenes footage of this, which I never realized, but apparently, when they started filming this movie, they used to have somebody follow around his character with a fan so that his long coat was like blowing in the wind. And this was somehow supposed to give a hint to the audience that Judge Doom, spoiler alert, is not quite human. And to be completely honest, I'm not sure how that connects. Why does wind blowing through a coat make you not quite human? I don't know. And that's probably why it's not more of a thing. It sounds like they kind of dropped that idea at some point. But I was like, that's fascinating that there were, supposed to be hints of the reality of who Judge Doom is. I loved that.
And Christopher Lloyd did a Twitter Q&A on the Disney Plus Twitter account to promote the series. And I was watching one of the questions that they answered, and I had no idea about this. They didn't touch upon it in the episode, but Christopher Lloyd was talking about the entirety of the film. You do not see Judge Doom blink once.
Oh, wow.
The whole time he acted and did not blink a single time because, as he said on Twitter, he's a cartoon character. Cartoons don't need to blink to re-water their eyes. So that was a hint that there's something up with him because you never see him blink.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating. I did not realize that either. Talk about a scary character, though. This is a scary character. He's so good. Oh.
You saw when he put that hat back on, you could see in his face, he got right back into character.
Oh, yeah. He gave the look and he was right there. And it was, yeah, he's so wonderful. I love him. We did get to see the car mechanism that was used for Benny the Cab. That was essentially, what was hidden, but what Bob Hoskins wrote in. That was pretty, frankly, looked terrifying. I wouldn't have been happy to have been strapped into that thing with somebody else driving it. Oof. It looked scary.
No, nope, not at all.
But one of the most iconic pieces for me was the shade silhouette, where the shade that Roger crashes through and it cuts out the silhouette of his figure. And they were kind of describing how they created that effect and how they did it in one take. And it's all done practically. That's something that 100% would have been done digitally today. But back in 1988, when they were making this, it was, or I guess 87, they would have been making it. It was released in 88. That's something that was done practically, and that's incredible. Yeah. Like really,
it really
cool.
is, and it's such an iconic image too. I always love whenever I'm walking around Hollywood Studios, looking up in the Echo Lake area, and they have a window with the frame and the silhouette of Roger running through it is still on display to this day. Every time I'm there, I look up and just smile. I'm like, I love the homages.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it was really kind of interesting that he met up with the actor who's the voice of Roger, Charles Fleischer, and with a giant rubber reference Roger that they used to have on set. But the thing that was so interesting, number one, Charles seems insane. But number two, is the fact, I didn't realize this, that Charles Fleischer, the voice of Roger, was on set during the making of the film, which is really really uncommon. Like, voiceover people are typically not on set. So
Right.
that might be like the only case I can think of that ever happening that I know of. I thought that was crazy.
Yeah, and I feel like it was definitely a necessity and probably helped a lot with Bob Hoskins' performance, because you have this crazy, zany cartoon character that you're interacting with. So to be able to react off of live audio from the character instead of just pausing for like 3 seconds and thinking of what he's saying in your head, I think that probably helped a lot in terms of making the film.
Yeah, it was wild. So that was a really fun episode. That was one of my favorites, I would say. And then they did not disappoint with the final episode of the series, or at least the final episode of season 1, and that was the Muppet Movie. And this is the original Muppet Movie from the 1970s, and it starts in Brian Henson's office, who is the son of course, Jim Henson. And I will say I have been in Brian Henson's office, and it was kind of cool. It's kind of cool to have seen it on the show, because it's really weird. I was at the Henson lot there, which was Charlie Chaplin's old lot. I was there to see Dave Goelz receive an award, and it was just kind of like an open house situation that I was invited to. And when I say open house, like, it was truly open. Like, they were just letting people walk in and out of Brian Henson's office, and I was like, that's weird. I cannot imagine any party at the Walt Disney Studios lot where, like, yeah, walk on into Mr. Iger's office. That's cool, no problem. It was very weird, very like small hometown kind of feel to it. And I was like, all right. So, like, I don't know, it was weird. So in any case, it starts in that office, and he's trying to get some information, and it leads him to Drew Struzan's place. And Drew Struzan is super famous for being the artist who created so many iconic movie posters like Back to the Future, the Star Wars films. And I didn't realize the artwork for a lot, if not all, of the Muppet movies. And I would be remiss not to mention, I would not be Jeff DePauli if I didn't mention the fact that there was a moment where they showed a piece of art that he created for Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas for the Henson Company, and I about lost my mind. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's my favorite thing.
I know what that is.
It's my favorite thing that the Jim Henson Company has ever done, and I was not expecting to see some Emmett Otter in the episode, and that was phenomenal. But you know, to see that original artwork is pretty cool. And Drew Struzan has a great deal where apparently he keeps the original and the studio just gets prints of it. And I was like, smart guy, very smart.
Very, very smart. Because, yeah, so many iconic posters you think about, like, that he's done. Practically, you think of your top 5 favorite pieces of poster art that were painted. It's most likely all 5 are probably his art.
Yeah, he has a very specific style, and it's great. Really, really fun stuff. But what were some of your favorite moments in this episode?
Honestly, for me, it was getting to sit down with Gonzo. And chat with Gonzo. I loved that.
Yeah, that was fun. So Gonzo appeared in the episode, as did his right-hand man, Dave Goelz. And we did see the cool Gonzo plumbing statue that was on the top of his car during the film, so that was cool. The Studebaker is apparently in the Studebaker Museum, Fozzie's car, which I thought was, I'm surprised that thing's still around. That was kind of shocking to me.
That was actually one of the things that I learned and did not know, was how the driving mechanism worked for that Studebaker, so that the performers could lay down the front seat and do Kermit and Fozzie and make it look like they're driving, but, you know, they had the guy sitting in the back driving with like a camera or something on the front.
It was very much like Benny from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Like, so it was just kind of stunt driving like we used to see at the Lights, Motors, Action stunt show.
Oh, yeah. Exactly.
So, yeah, so it was cool to see that. And then, you know, the big thing in this episode, I would have to say, is at the end, we see Paul Williams, who wrote not only the Rainbow Connection, but so much music for the Muppets, including every song in Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas. And he, you know, we get to see the Kermit Banjo from that opening scene of the Muppet Movie at this point. And, you know, that's, talk about iconic movie prop. Like, that's an iconic moment. And actually, I thought it was interesting. I'd never heard this before, but Paul Williams said that he kind of was trying to make a tune that would do the same thing that When You Wish Upon a Star did at the beginning of Pinocchio. And I'm like, wow, it does. You know, I would never connect those two things, but it made sense the second he said it.
Yeah, and it just seeing him, like, holding the banjo again and reminiscing. And it's just, one of those things, the reunions. I think that was probably my favorite aspect of the whole series is the reunions.
Yeah, it's a really, really, really well done series. I even if I wasn't binging it to record this episode, I would have binged it anyway. Like, it was fantastic. Highly suggest it. One of my favorite things on Disney Plus. So I really hope they get a second season. I feel like I've been seeing a lot of buzz about it on social media, so people seem to really like it.
No, yeah, the feedback has been pretty much all positive from all accounts that I've seen online this past weekend. People are loving the show and loving being able to be nostalgic and look back in their childhood and see things again. I definitely feel that this is a show that could go on for a long, long time, many different seasons, because there's so many more films you could touch upon. You could even start doing old theme park rides, because the archives definitely have a lot of stuff from like Horizons and other old retired attractions that you could do episodes on as well. So I feel like the potential for this show is endless, and I really hope that the positive feedback encourages them to make another season.
Yeah, I hope so as well. And I highly encourage anybody listening to watch it if you haven't yet. If you have Disney Plus, totally worth it. And if you don't have Disney Plus, sign up for the free trial and you can binge these super fast within that week of free trial. And
exactly.
Yeah, it's really, really good. So in any case, I think that means we should do some trivia, shall we?
Yes, let's do it.
Do you know the answer? Get your brain gears churning and play along. It's trivia time.
Alrighty, do you want to hit me with a trivia question first, or shall I hit you?
I'll hit you first here.
Okay, let's hear it.
All right, so of course we've talked much about Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. I mentioned that I got to work for a year at the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids movie set adventure at Hollywood Studios. I want you to list 5 things in the playground that were representations of props and elements of the film.
Okay, well, you had Auntie.
Mm-hmm.
You had the dog's nose.
Mm-hmm.
You had... there was Play-Doh, but I don't remember Play-Doh in the film. There was the Kodak film slide. That's not in the film. Well, there was the giant grass blades. Does that count or no?
I'm not going to count that because that fills the entire playground practically.
At one point, there was a giant bee, but I don't think it was there toward the end. I remember...
It was still there at the end.
Okay, so the giant bee, so that's 3 things. Super Soaker is not in the movie. Oh, there was a giant Lego, or at least a building brick, whatever they called it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, there was.
So that's 4. And was there a cookie?
There was a cookie, yes.
Okay, that's 5. What else was there that I missed?
There's one more. It wasn't there at the end of its run, but when it first opened, I have a photo in it.
Oh, the hose.
It was a giant... The hose was there to the end. So that's
okay, well, that's from the film as well. Well, I guess it was a sprinkler in the movie, but yeah.
There was a giant Cheerio at one point.
Oh, that sounds familiar. Okay.
Yeah. For some reason, it got taken out. I'm not sure when or why it was taken out, but it was there when it first opened. I have a photo sitting in it, but it was not there at the end.
Tell me this: did the footprint of that little playground shrink over time, or was it always that size?
I think it was always that size.
Okay.
From what I remember as a kid, I don't remember it ever shrinking because the restaurant that it was next
shrinking.
The restaurant it was next to was always there. Streets of America was always there. The footprint around the playground never really changed at all. So I feel like they did take out some things like the giant Cheerios, but all in all, it was practically the same thing. And of course, when film reels went out of style, they got rid of the Kodak, and it just became a random slide that people kept calling a battery when I was working there, and I'm just like, it's not a battery. So there were some like little touch ups here and there throughout the years, but in terms of its footprint, it was pretty much the same.
It's interesting just because it felt so much bigger to me when it first opened, but I was a little kid, so that would make sense. Toward the end, it started feeling very, very small. Yeah. But in any case, my question for you, we were talking about Walt's office back on the studio lot from the Mary Poppins episode, and, Walt Disney was in that office from 1940 till 1966 when he passed away, but I'm wondering if you can tell me what happened to that space the years after he passed up until they restored it in 2015 to the condition it was in when Walt was there.
That's a dang good question, because I am not sure, honestly. I remember when they announced the restoration, because they used to have like a little mock-up of the office on display inside One Man's Dream at MGM Hollywood Studios. And then when they announced the restoration, that went away, because I think that they were using some elements of that to help with the restoration. But honestly, I actually don't know what happened, what was going on in that space from Walt's death to the restoration. I would love to know.
Okay, well, for a few years, nothing was happening. It sat there, and they did nothing with it for a few years until archives went in and inventoried what was there. And then after that, the head of the studio, actually, that was their office into the early 90s until the Michael D. Eisner building was built in 1990. So for a long time, the head of the studio, just like Walt, was in that space. And the thing that I find super strange is after that, it just became the office of some like random producers. And the last producer to be in that space was Mark Cherry, who created the series Desperate Housewives. But
Yeah.
It must be very strange to be like a producer whose office is on the Disney lot to like know, oh, I'm in the space that was once Walt's office. And don't get me wrong, like it was totally changed up to that point. It wasn't recognizable at all as Walt's office anymore. But still, to like know that would feel strange to me. So
And it makes me wonder if they even knew. I'm sure they told him, it was like, hey, by the way, do you know the history of this room? I'm sure they probably knew.
They probably even chopped it up into several smaller offices because it's a pretty large space. But yeah, such an interesting thing to do with, Walt's office. But it's glorious now. That's one of the best things I think the Walt Disney Archives has done. They've done a really great job bringing that office back to life. So it's very cool. So if you get a chance sometime, I would say definitely check it out.
If I can, I will. My wife's a cast member now, so I know that she can get onto the studio lot every now and then. So we may go up there one year. I do remember it was the last D23 Expo I went to, 2017. I was there as media covering for Attractions Magazine, and I was in a media lounge. And next door was a place for the sorcerers, people who had like the sorcerers package for the expo. And a cast member came up to me before they opened this lounge for the members and said, "Hey, we need to test something out. Do you mind coming over and testing something out?" And I was like, "Sure, I've got time." I go over there and they put a VR set on me, and all of a sudden I'm transported into Walt's office as it was in the 60s.
Oh, that's cool.
And because this was like a special experience that they were giving just for the Sorcerers Package members, but they needed to test it out before they let them in. So I got to be the guinea pig and walk around virtually in his office. So that's the closest I've ever been. That was surreal.
That's very cool. I didn't even know that existed. That's fun.
Yeah, I think it was just a thing for the expo.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Banks, thanks so much for coming on the show. Why don't you let folks know where they can connect with you?
Yeah, so you can find me personally on Twitter at Bankslee and on Instagram at Disney Goofball. And my full-time job, I'm the media manager for Attractions Magazine. So you can find me on all of the social medias at Attractions on Twitter, Attractions Magazine on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, and then attractionsmagazine.com.
And if you don't hear enough opinions from me, Jeff DePauli, you can go to attractionsmagazine.com and check out my DePauli on DeParks column that I have there.
Love that name.
My friend Ruben came up with that name, and it was pretty much everybody agreed, yep, that's the one, DePauli on DeParks. So you can check out my opinions over there that are sometimes controversial. But yeah, in any case, thank you so much, Banks. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you, Jeff. Anytime.
I hope you all enjoyed the Prop Culture series as much as we did. Now, if you haven't listened to this past Wednesday's episode yet, be sure to give it a listen as I chat with a Disneyland Parade performer about the epic new Disneyland Park Parade, Magic Happens. And don't forget to hear the latest Disney news every Sunday in the House of Mouse Headlines. All of this great content lands in your podcast feed for free when you subscribe. And folks, if you haven't heard, DisneyCoastToCoast.com has been recently updated with additional content. At DisneyCoastToCoast.com, you can get yourself some free gifts like my exclusively curated documents, including America's Hidden Mickeys, featuring lesser-known Disney destinations to visit around the USA. On the Roadie again, featuring some of Master Imagineer Joe Roadie's most interesting and informative posts, my Disney music playlist, and so much more. You can get all of this for free at DisneyCoastToCoast.com. Plus, I'm currently testing out transcribing each episode of Disney Coast to Coast. If this is something that interests you, I would really appreciate you checking it out at DisneyCoastToCoast.com and giving me your feedback as I test this new option. Other than that, folks, have a magical day. Bye!
Thanks for listening to Disney Coast to Coast. Have a magical day.
Disney Coast to Coast is produced and hosted by Jeff DePauli. Learn more about the podcast and become a supporter at DisneyCoastToCoast.com.